Don't worry if you guys have to leave early or jump off. I'm recording the session so you can go back and check it out whenever you have a chance. So during the session, I'm just going to go over my pencil lettering tips and tricks for the challenge. I'm sure you guys all are joining the pencil lettering challenge, and I know a lot of people are having struggles with, smudging and how to, prep their designs and how to put a final piece on paper, especially a notebook. So I'm going to show you guys how I do it. That way for the next challenge or this challenge number 2, you guys can apply those same techniques. And feel free to stop me at any point today. If you guys have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can just interrupt me and ask me during the session. So I'm going to jump in. And again, feel free to stop me if you guys have any questions. So first off, I'm sure you guys already know, these are the tools that I primarily use. They're very, very simple tools. I have just a notebook, and the one that I recommended to you guys was the Baronfig notebook. And I'll be sure to link you guys all of this information in case you guys want it. And then I also make sure I have scratch paper. So this is something I probably didn't mention before, but I always have some scratch paper handy. This is where my initial designs start. All my sketches, my rough drafts, this is where it starts. And then I just use the Blackwing pencils. I love these pencils. I use the Pearl and the 602. So the Pearl kind of has like a lighter shade, almost like a softer kind of lead. And the 602 is a little bit darker and then a little bit more rough. So you can kind of see the difference once you actually get them and try them out yourself. You'll see that they do have a different kind of feel to them. And then I always like to have a lead pencil whenever I'm doing the pencil lettering challenge, because there are, letters that you want to make sure that you're outlining them in a very thin line, at least for me. So I like to use the lead pencil for that. And obviously a ruler, a sharpener, and eraser. And you don't need anything super fancy. These are just some of the things that I got off of Amazon. This eraser is I want to say $3 or $4 for a 4-pack or something like that on Amazon. So, and this eraser works really, really well. I know there's really, really great erasers out there, but this one works perfect for me. Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you guys an example to just get started. The last challenge that we did, which was the first one, this one, this new one, challenge number 2. So I made this on my notebook, but what you guys didn't see was that I actually did a bunch of sketches on scratch paper. So you can see here, I just have this here, and I just went crazy, just drawing a bunch of different ideas. And you can tell they do not look final. They look really messy, dirty, smudgy, nothing is clean at all here. It's just me giving myself ideas for how I want the final design to look. So I just like to kind of play around with how I want it to look. So you can see here, if I bring this up a little bit closer, nothing special about the designs, but once you start kind of, going at it and adding more detail to it, you can kind of give yourself, creative freedom to kind of play around with the design, and also use your imagination to kind of pick something that you feel like will work within the page. So I always try to make sure I fill up my page. That's the other thing. So in my notebook, so depending on where you are, doing the challenge, whether it's on a regular small notebook or a larger notebook, I recommend a smaller notebook because that way you don't have to do too much work. And my goal is to always try to fill up most of this page. So I try to fill up about this much, leaving about 1 inch around. That's my goal for each of my designs. So this one I left a little bit more, and this one you can see there's about 1 inch around the design. Okay, so now once I've kind of decided, okay, this is the design I want to choose. Let's say this is actually the one that I decided to go with, this one right here. And you can see I started off with this one, then I went to this one. And even in my final design, I still changed it a little bit, if you guys can tell. It's not exactly like this because once I start lettering on paper, I kind of notice that maybe I need to, adjust the layout. So it kind of changes as I go. So just to kind of give you guys an example, I have another notebook here just to kind of show you guys how this would work. So if you guys haven't done challenge number 2, it's to introduce yourself so we can get to know each other. This is one of my favorite challenges because we kind of get to know each other within the community. There's so many people joining the challenge, so I like to see what you guys are up to and get to know a little bit more about you guys. So also, this is the Baronfig notebook as well, but this is dotted. And if you have trouble, creating guidelines and things like that, I recommend getting the dotted notebook if you like those types of notebooks for the challenge. But this one is really great as well. Okay, so if I were to start, once I started sketching my designs, it could be messy. It doesn't have to be, super, super final. And that's like the thing that I always try to emphasize is whenever you're designing, it's not perfect at first. It's kind of just a bunch of sketches and scribbles and things like that, kind of just a bunch of scribbles all over the page that doesn't really make sense, and it looks, not like the nicest design to look at. So if I had something like this, what I would do is I'll start on a new piece of paper. And let's just say we want to write maybe this, we'll do this quote again. So, hello, my name is Natalie. So what I'll essentially do is I'll just go in and just write a bunch of layouts. And so once I kind of decide on the layout, I will start incorporating, maybe design styles or lettering styles. Maybe I want the top to be rounded. And you see it's literally just me scribbling on the page. I'm not doing anything crazy. Maybe I want my name, the name to be large like this. And then maybe my name in cursive. So I start to develop it as I go. And then once I have this, I'll do it again. Maybe I'll refine it even more. And let's say now at this point, I'll start maybe adding some width to my letters, maybe giving myself some rules. So if you guys have taken any of my courses, I try to emphasize that whenever you are kind of creating a new style of lettering, you want to give yourself stylistic rules. So let's say for this letter, I want it to be a serif. I want it to have this wide type of serif. And you see it's really messy. This is literally how I'm designing. It's not perfect. All my designs start off this way, very messy. I can't imagine like just jumping on the page and lettering, and I've done that before, and I'm never happy with my design. So I definitely recommend planning it and just kind of, sketching out some designs beforehand. And then maybe I'll add like a ribbon here, and then maybe my name in cursive. So I can think of, okay, maybe something like this. So kind of once I've gone over a bunch of different sketches, once I've, done a ton of different sketches, it depends on you, how much you're willing to do, how many sketches you're willing to put out until you really like something. For me, I can do something like this and I can be like, okay, I have a good idea for how I want it to look. Now I can start doing the final design. That's just my process. But I highly recommend sketching out your work beforehand. And this goes for anything whenever you're designing for anybody else. Designing for clients, I definitely recommend sketching, whether it be on the iPad or on a notebook. Sketching will help you, come up with these cool ideas. Okay, so now that I have my sketch, let's say I have this sketch and I want this one, I want to select this one for the design. I go into my notebook because this is where the final piece is going to go. So we want to avoid smudging, we want to avoid mistakes. Those are the biggest things, smudging and mistakes, especially if you're working on paper. And we want to think about spacing. So we want to give every word some space in between each other. So we want to give it, room to breathe. So what I normally do is I already look at my layout here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections here. So I try to lay this out on my page, 5 different sections. And this is where I bring in the ruler. I use my ruler for all of the challenges. This is why everything kind of look straight. I try to make it look straight, but I'm using the ruler for everything. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I need 5 sections for my lettering. There are some larger sections. So name and Natalie is going to be some of the larger sections, and then hello, my, and is are going to be smaller sections. So I kind of start to look at the page and see how I can lay this out. And at this point, I don't use my lead pencil. I use the Blackwing Pearl. If you guys have a really light, soft pencil, I recommend doing that for sketching out your work. And the second thing is I do not sketch out my entire design. So I know I've seen a lot of you guys sketch out your whole design and then go in and add, the final touches and, darkening your designs. I don't do it that way because I would smudge it for sure. And I know there's parts that I want to erase. So I start off with the first part. I literally work my way down. So from top to bottom. At this point, I would give myself some guides for hello. So maybe I think at this point I'll keep it on a straight line. And again, we want to give ourselves maybe like an inch to the top. So at this point, I'm just drawing really, really light guides. Super, super light. And you guys might not be able to see it. It's really light for a reason because I want to either be able to erase it easily or I want to just leave it and you guys can't even tell that they're there. So that's why I use the guides. And then I'm going to write hello. So I'm not going on to the next word or the next part of my layout. I'm just starting at the top. So at this point I need to write hello, and hello is 5 letters. So I have to see, okay, 5 letters, and I just over the page just kind of guesstimate where I'm going to place these letters. So I'll lightly just draw the letters here. And you can see it's sort of, fitting within the page, fitting within that layout. I might need to adjust something a little bit more. And as I'm going, you see like, okay, maybe this one's a little bit too far off to the right. And that's why we draw it really lightly, because we want to make sure we can erase it and it doesn't smudge. I know some erasers don't really work that well, so we got to keep that in mind as well. So I'll start again on this side, and I'm just going to bring it in just a little bit closer. Okay, so now I feel like this works better. This fits better within my page. So now once I've sketched out that design, okay, now I can finalize this section. So before I do that, I want to erase the guides that are in the way that I don't need. So that's in between letters. I'm just erasing those guides. Okay, so you see now I have hello, and it's, just looks very, very simple. Then at this point, I would grab my darker pencil, which is the 602 pencil, and I would use my ruler, depending on the style of lettering you're trying to do, I would use my ruler to start sketching out my design. So maybe I want my letters to be really thick, maybe about this thick. And if you guys don't want to use a ruler, that's okay. I just prefer it because I feel like my letters come out nicer that way. And I try to make sure that they're all the same width. And again, you don't have to use a ruler. Sometimes I'll just draw it without the ruler. Again, it just depends on your preference. And I will start filling in this letter. So I'm just filling in the H, and I'm not going on to the E. Just sticking to the H, because especially with lead and depending on the pencil that you're using, it could smudge really easily. And my work still has smudges on it. And I'll just either try to very carefully erase it, or I will use Photoshop to try to get rid of those smudges. If you guys use Photoshop, it will be a game changer because you can, hide those smudges in case you have any. So I have my H, and so at this point, I would continue going on to the rest of my word. So I have hello, and I would go to the E, the L, and the O. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I don't want to take up too much of your time, like I said. I could take an hour on this. You guys know that, doing the challenges does take a while. But I'm going to go on to the next section. So once I finished my top section, I'll make sure to give it space. So we want to make sure we give our space for the top one. So I'll go grab my light pencil and give myself a guide here to say, hey, this is the spacing we want to give for this top section. So the next word I have is my, and then I can think of, okay, I have my here. Maybe I want to change the way it looks. Totally up to you, depending on how you want it to look. So then I'll draw another guide. Maybe I want my to be a little bit smaller. Just like that. And maybe I want it to be in cursive. So maybe this time I want to draw it in cursive. So again, I will use my lighter, softer pencil, and I will draw in cursive my. Like this, something like this. And you can see maybe this one's taking up a little bit too much room on the right. So the cool thing is with cursive, we can add, you know, tails and flourishes. So I can bring out this M this way. And now it feels more centered. And now I would go in and start, you know, finalizing that word. So what I would do is with a thinner stroke, so whenever I want to do any like, you know, cursive or thin strokes, I like to use the lead pencil. And another thing that I do is, you might not be able to tell here, but I like to make sure that the lead is flat, like at an angle. So I'll click it outwards, and I'll just do this on some scratch paper so that it's flat at an angle. And this gives the impression of like a calligraphy pen, or if you guys use Procreate, those calligraphy brushes, this gives that kind of impression on the paper. So at this point, I would just go in and trace my design. And then I can decide, you know, how thick or how thin I want my lettering to be. Again, it depends on the style that you want. So again, we want to give ourselves stylistic rules. Maybe for this lettering, I want it to be every downstroke is thick and every upstroke is thin. So I can do a downstroke here, a downstroke here. And I'm just giving myself these rules. And it's okay if you mess up. And so I've given myself a new style. Okay, so this is how my word will look. Now I can go in and fill it in. So I'll go in and fill in the word. And so this is why I like to use the lead pencil at this point, because I feel like sometimes with cursive, it's the where you need to fill is really, really small. So I like to just make sure I do not get out of those areas. And you don't need anything fancy for this, just a simple lead pencil. Mine's 0.5 millimeters. I know there's thicker ones, but I like the 0.5 millimeters. And then I'm almost done with mine. And you can see here, I have no smudges on my page yet, but that's because I'm working from the top down. So now that I have my done, then I would go on to the next section. So then the next section would be name. So then I would go on to name. And again, I want to make sure I give myself some guides. So for this style, I made it more like an outwards kind of design here. So I can go in and lightly sketch it. Some guides here. Something like that. And then I would continue adding my design. So at this point, then I can, you know, guesstimate, okay, let me write name and see how far that would go. What I would do if it's like a short word, I would start off with the 2 letters on the beginning and the end. So I would start over here with the N and then the E over here. And then I would find a way to fit the A and the M here. So I have A and then the M. And you see now we can fit the word name in there. And it's really, really light for a reason, because we want to be able to erase it and fix any smudges that we want to get rid of. So at this point, I would go in and erase very carefully any areas that I don't need. And so do not do this on your page, because that is going to create more smudges. What I recommend is blowing it off, like just blowing it off that way so that you don't smudge it, or just using maybe a Post-it and just wiping it off the page very carefully. But once you start doing this and smudging it, it's definitely, the lead is definitely going to smudge on the page. Okay, so then I would continue with my letters. So I want to make sure that they're about the same here. And I'll continue drawing my letters here. And you see slowly it's coming together And again, we want to give ourselves rules. And if you recall, for this letter or for this style of lettering, I said I wanted it to be a serif, wide serif type of letter. So something that goes like this. And so once I've done that letter, I want to fill in the N. So I'm not moving on to any of my other letters. I'm just filling in the N. And at this point, I might erase a little bit more because I don't need this. You know, a little, there's some guides that I put here that I don't need. I can erase those and in between the letters. Because once you start filling in your letter, I'm just carefully getting rid of that eraser. Once you start filling in your letters, it's going to be harder to erase because there's more ink on the page. So then at this point, I'll go in and with my other pencil, actually with my darker one, I want to outline it. And you can use your ruler for this, but I like to just trace it by hand because I've already used my ruler. And then almost done here. So now we have the N, and then I would go in and start filling it in. So again, starting from the left to the right, filling in my letter. So it's really simple steps. That's why I recommend just starting from the top down and avoiding just doing the whole thing at once. Because once you start doing the whole thing at once, you're just going to have more ways to smudge your design and mess up. And I've learned the hard way that the easiest way is just to work from the top down. And then we get to practice our lettering and improve by keeping a steady hand. This has worked for me. I've said this multiple times whenever I've done murals. There's been times where my projector doesn't work and I have to hand draw my letters or hand draw some of my designs. This practicing on paper has really helped me with that. So that's why I always recommend practicing on paper. So I'm not going to continue with name. So I'm going to continue with the rest of it so you guys can kind of already see what I'm doing. You're already getting the process of how this works. And then we have so the next portion is, again, we want to make sure we give ourselves spacing between letters. So I want to make sure there's enough space between name and is. And I want this to be in a ribbon, if you recall. So I'm just lightly drawing like a ribbon. Just like that. And then I'll write is in the middle. And it's not really centered, so that's why when we draw it lightly, we can go back, erase it, and fix it. And now we have is, and now I can go in and, make it darker. So I will go in with my darker pencil, and then I'll start making that ribbon. Now, if you guys want, I also sometimes use a little circle template whenever I'm going to draw circles or ribbons. This one's a little bit too round, but you can also use a circle template in case you guys want to try that. But I don't need that for this design. And I like to make my lines really thick because whenever you're photographing them, they just come out better. And that's the other tip I have for you guys is if you guys are designing on paper and doing the challenge, try to make your designs really dark and thick. And I know it makes it more difficult to avoid smudges, but it comes out better in photographs. So I have the is, and now I will actually go in with my lead pencil because it is a smaller letter. And with my ruler, very carefully, just going to go in and trace that I. And I kind of have a little guide here, so then I'll go in and carefully draw the I for the S. And then I continue with the S here. So the S's are a little bit harder to do. I just continue just tracing it until I like the thickness of the letter. And now we have the is. So again, we can change up the design, change up the look of it if we want. It's totally up to you. And last but not least, I just have my name, and I did say I wanted it to be in cursive. So I want to make sure I fill up this area. And again, I'm trying to give myself space all around my page. And so for my name, I think I want to make it maybe diagonal. So I'm going to grab my lighter, softer pencil, and I'm just going to draw a line here and here. But I also want to draw an inner line to give me a guide for my lowercase. So I'm just going to make sure I add a lowercase guide. And then I can start writing my name in cursive. So I'm just going to put N. Maybe add like a little flourish there. And then start writing my name. And then I want to use up the space. So there we go. I have my name in cursive, and we've pretty much utilized the entire space. So then at this point, again, to finalize my design, I'm going to go in and start tracing with my lead pencil because my cursive is thinner. And I just like to trace it at first. So here's the other thing. So now that I've written my word out here, or my name out here, it's going to be harder as I start filling in my letter because I can start smudging. This is where the scratch paper comes in handy as well. I would essentially just take off a piece of paper, just taking off a scratch piece of paper, and I'm placing it on my page, covering everything that I'm, putting pressure on from my hand. So I can continue the N and give myself some rules again. Downstrokes are thin and upstrokes are thin. Give myself those rules. So maybe I want this one to be thick as well as this one. This one's a little bit thinner. And maybe I want the ends to be nice and round. So you can see here I'm not affecting my design and I'm not smudging the rest of it. And then I can go in, and this one's a little bit thicker. You can continue filling it in with your lead pencil if you want. If you feel like, okay, the pencil is a little bit too, the lead is a little bit too wide for this. Also, depending on the pencil that you're using can determine how dark it looks. I don't know if you guys can tell, but these two are from the Blackwing 602 pencil, and the Blackwing 602 comes out fairly dark. So I have to press, pretty hard for this one to come out dark. So I'm just going to finish filling in the N. And so I have my N here, and we can go ahead and, finish the rest of the name, whatever our name is. We could finish it as we are doing the N, continue putting our piece of paper on it. Okay, so now that, let's say I finished my whole design. Hello, my name is Natalie. It's all done. Okay, everything looks great. But now I want to add maybe some illustrations on the page. Maybe I want to erase certain areas. This is where the paper comes in handy again. So this is where I would take the paper, place it on the page, and erase any areas I don't need. So I'm just going in and just erasing. So there's a little portion here next to the M. And then even between my letters, there's pencil marks there. And I can use my paper to just kind of slowly move it off the page. But you can see here I kind of smudged it here. So you have to be very careful. I can go in with the eraser here and just erase. And that pretty much cleaned it up. And so yeah, I'm just using my paper to erase. So just placing it on the page and erasing any portions I don't need. And again, I just recommend blowing off the rest of the eraser pieces on the page because it'll just smudge. It's really hard to keep the pencil from smudging. And then once I've kind of erased everything and I feel like, okay, this is great and I want to add some more designs, maybe I want to add sparkles, I can go in and place my page. And then maybe with my lead pencil, because sparkles are a little bit thinner, I can draw my sparkles. And then fill them in. And just like that, I can slowly add like little illustrations or drawings around my design to fill up the extra space. Maybe I want to add some lines around my cursive. So you don't have to do this. This is why I recommend, waiting to the very end to add maybe some more details. First start from the top down, sketch out everything. Make sure you're giving yourself some guides, very, very light guides, giving yourself some rules for your lettering, giving yourself, those stylistic design rules, making sure there's spacing between each word. And then at the very end, once you've, everything's done, use the piece of paper, the scratch piece of paper, to go in and erase any extra areas or add any details. So we can add details to our design. Maybe I want to add maybe a line, a little line to these letters here. And I can do that for all of my letters once they're all done. And then I can also see, can I even add those details? Maybe it'll feel a little bit too squished. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I'm designing in my notebook. So I'm taking the sketches, I'm sketching it on the side on a piece of scratch paper. Then I'm taking it to my final my piece of paper on my notebook, because this is where it's going to go, the final piece. And it's because I also want my notebook to be completely done. I don't want it to be full of sketches and stuff. So I want to be able to open it and just have final pieces of work there. That's why I like to work with scratch paper. And yeah, so that is my process for lettering on paper. And these are just the tips that I recommend for you guys whenever you guys are doing the challenge or working on paper. Do you guys have any questions? I know that was, pretty straightforward. Yes, so Fiamma is asking if I'm going to post the live on YouTube. Yes, I will be posting the replay on YouTube. Sorry about not being on YouTube live, but I'll definitely be posting it on YouTube, the recording for this session. Thank you so much. Gracias, Fiamma. Yeah, does anybody else have any questions or concerns or any questions about the challenge? This is the perfect time to ask me. I know that it's, again, really straightforward with the pencil and the paper. Oh, no worries. Okay. Yeah. Yes. So that's a great question. That was probably one of my biggest challenges when I first started too. Whenever I'm, designing a layout or trying to come up with a layout, I'm thinking about the words that are on the page. So this works really well. Like, I learned this actually from doing greeting card design. So depending on the quote, let's say we have a quote that says, wishing you the best of luck. So if I were to write, I always write down my quote too, wishing you the best of luck. So I always look at the quote first. So we want to think about which of the words are our standout words, which are the most important words. So I would say wishing and probably best and luck are the standout words. And maybe it's kind of semi-important. But these are the standout words. So whenever I'm designing a layout, I want to think about, okay, the sizing of my words. So when you think about size, it's going to be incorporated into the layout, and that's going to help you decide on layouts. So wishing, best, and luck, and you are going to be fairly large, while the and of are going to be smaller. So that's the first portion that I think about whenever I'm designing anything, whether it be on paper or on the iPad. And then once I kind of figured out, okay, these are my important words, then I'll start, just sketching out a bunch of random designs on my page. And it doesn't even have to make sense. This is where I kind of say, like, practicing on paper is really good because it kind of forces you to use your imagination to come up with different layouts. So at this point, I would just start writing it on the page. And then maybe U small here. And then best is big. Of luck. And you can see it doesn't really make sense at first. Maybe it looks really messy. You can't really see how a layout would be developed from this simple sketch, but once I start refining it, we can. So I've created this very simple sketch here. So let's say I've sketched out this layout. I can go in and refine it. So it's all about like taking what you've already made and just refining it more and more. So then at this point, I would say, okay, I want wishing big. And then I want you, maybe semi-big here. And then the, maybe on the side here. And then best, maybe let's do it diagonally. Maybe with like a little T, something like that. And then the of down here. And then doing luck big here. And then we have all the space in the middle. We have some space here. And that's great space to maybe add illustrations that represent your quote, or maybe add some doodles, things like that. So essentially that's how I do it. I start off with writing my quote, picking out the standout words, making sure that those are going to be the most important words on the page, and then just kind of scribbling out different ways to write it on a page, and then taking that very simple scribble to refining it even more. And then again, I would take this and refine it even more. It doesn't really need to take that much time. I would just go in and again, bless you. I would go in and just continue refining it even more. And maybe at this point, I can start deciding what are some styles that I want to use for my lettering. So maybe I want to use like a serif here, and I don't have to go crazy. I just kind of sketch out some ideas of how I want the letters to look. You see it looks super messy because I feel like if we spend so much time on this part, it's going to take a long time. Once you kind of give yourself like some rules for how you want the final design to look, it's going to be easy from here on out. So that's how I kind of decide on layouts. And then when it comes to styles, the biggest thing I say is like there are styles that you can start off with. So we have serif letters and sans serif letters and cursive letters. So start off with those types of letters. We have a serif, which is a letter that has a little attachment to the ends of them. So it's something like this. This is a serif letter. These little attachments. So these little attachments, those are serifs. So we can change the type of serif. So if you think about serifs and sans serifs, when you want to create a serif letter, we can change the serif. Maybe we want to make it a blocky serif, something like this. Maybe we want to make it rounded. So think about those like main types of letter styles. So serif, sans serif, cursive, and think about how you can change them. Maybe we want to make the main stroke really thin. Maybe something very thin like this. Oops, my pencil broke. Maybe something like this, really thin. So play around with the weight, play around with the serif style, and play around with the cursive style. So cursive style, really simple as well. Always start off with a very, very simple word. Let's say we write hello, and then we give ourselves some rules when it comes to style. So maybe every downstroke is thick. Maybe every top stroke is really thick and the bottom stroke is really thin. Maybe it looks like a balloon. So you're just giving yourself some rules, and then you can kind of use your imagination to develop different styles. So that's how I kind of play around with styles and come up with different styles, just giving myself some rules. Sorry, I'm reading other questions. How do you decide how many type and style fonts do you use for a design? I tend to overdo it. Do you have any tips on this? Yes, I do. So whenever I'm doing any design work, whether it be for the challenge, whether it be for client work, I try to stick to a maximum of about 3 to 4 lettering styles. And I don't like to go beyond that, because once you kind of go beyond that, it kind of looks like all over the place design. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say the hello and is are pretty similar. I would probably make the is the same as the hello. But we have the name, it's its own style, and the cursive, we have 2 cursives here. And I would try to make sure that this cursive looks very similar to this cursive. So I try to also organize it so that it's like regular text and then cursive and then regular text and then a regular text, then cursive. I kind of try to break it up. So again, I recommend 3 to 4. If you're just starting, I would say start off with 3. And then once you kind of get more practice, you can kind of, up to your own, whenever you're looking at your work, you might say, hey, this can add another style. Okay, I'm going to add another style. But I would say if you're starting off, definitely start off with 3, and then you'll see like you have a more cohesive design. Somebody said, I noticed you use paper to remove the eraser bits. Have you ever used a brush to remove them? Yes, I have. I was going to show you guys that, but I usually have paintbrushes all over my desk and they're gone. I have used a paintbrush, so I would recommend that as well. If you guys have like a paintbrush, it's a really great way to get rid of the eraser parts on your page. So the paintbrush doesn't smudge. I don't know why. I think it's just because it's a really soft brush, but I just use the paintbrush to get rid of the eraser parts on my page. So that's another thing I recommend. Try out a paintbrush. And somebody asked, how long does it take you to do a finished piece? For example, the ones for the challenge. Thank you, Daniela. So this one, let's see, the last one we did, because I did a time lapse on it, so I know how long it took me. So the final design, when I did the time lapse, I think it took me about 40 to 45 minutes to just do the final piece on paper. So that's not counting doing the sketching on the scratch paper. I would say the scratch paper probably took me about maybe 10-15 minutes. And then I plan out recording and stuff, so that takes more time. But when I did the final piece on paper, when I started adding the final adding the final design on the page, about 40 to 45 minutes. Some designs take longer. It just depends on how long the quote is or how detailed my lettering is, how much detail I'm adding to the page. There's been, designs that I've done that take way longer. But yeah, it just depends on the quote, the amount of words, and the style that you're using, to be honest. And also the size of the page. That's what I was saying. Like, if you guys are doing the challenge, I recommend doing it kind of like on a smaller scale notebook. These are, a good size, about the size of my hand, a little bit bigger. And they are a good size for me. I think you don't have to spend too much time designing on a huge piece of paper. The smaller notebooks come in handy for that. Okay, I'm just checking if there's any other questions. Looks like I answered all of them. Thank you so much. I'm really glad. I'm hoping this was helpful, because I know some people were messaging me, hey, how do you stop the smudging? How do you make it so like neat? How is it like not smudged all over the place? So I was like, okay, I need to make a video on this, because it's, there's really, really simple techniques you can implement, and you will be good to go once you guys implement these. Do you guys have any other questions before we go? Thank you so much, Bethany. I'm super glad this was helpful, because yeah, I was unsure. I was like, maybe they'll want to know this information, maybe not. But it's really great to actually hear it from you guys that it's helpful. Yeah, really great to know. Thank you so much, Anna. Okay, so if nobody has any more questions, again, if any questions pop up later on, maybe something comes to your mind later on, feel free to message me. You guys know that you can message me on Instagram. Any way possible, like, feel free to email me, message me on Instagram or social media. I am always replying. Yay, welcome to lettering, Kristen. Hopefully this was helpful. Yeah, so for me, just kind of wrap it all up, I started lettering on paper when I started my business. It was 7 years ago, and I didn't get an iPad till about, I want to say, 2 years ago. So most of my work was done on paper. I would, scan it to my computer and vectorize it in Illustrator. And that was really, really hard. It does take longer, but it's still possible to get client work and do work that way with just paper and a pencil. And that's how I feel like I've improved my lettering so much, is that I've just practiced on paper so much. I've been forced to, because for the longest time I couldn't afford an iPad. So definitely recommend practicing on paper. That's why I do the challenge, because I know it's helped me, and I know at the end of it, you guys might see some improvement in your lettering as well. But if nobody has any other questions, I'll go ahead and end the live stream. But I'll go ahead and upload this to YouTube, and you guys can rewatch, go back and view the tips and techniques in case you want to go back and look at them. But thank you guys for joining me. And again, feel free to ask me questions later on if anything pops up. Bye, guys. I'm going to end the live stream. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, guys.